Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Strange Pathways. I am your host, Scott Mort. I've had yet another wonderful week. It's getting colder here in Pennsylvania. It's a dark, cold, rainy Sunday. So do me a favor. Let's really enjoy this episode. I want you to listen to this episode right before bed. I want you in bed, nice, warm, toasty, lights turned off. Really get into that scared place. That enjoyable place, for me at least, it's enjoyable, of listening to something just slightly creepy in the safety of your own home. But maybe the safety of your own home isn't as safe as you think. Our first tale is going to take us all the way to Cumberland, England. Now, according to Augustus Hare, this takes place somewhere between 1875 and 1865. The Cranswell siblings, his relatives, two brothers and a sister, they're renting out this farmhouse near Croglin, Grange. And then this is the summer. This is the summertime that this is happening in. And it is just humid and vicious and hot. Like, the word oppressive comes immediately to mind. So they're out on this horribly hot night. And they're outside and they're looking up at the moon. And they decide to get a little sleep. Their sister Amelia, she's a lot like you are right now, tucked into bed. But whereas you're probably under the covers right now, Amelia's on top of them. She closes the bedroom window, but she leaves the shutters unlocked. Like a lot of us in the heat, Amelia is unable to sleep. So she just turns her head and looks out the window. Now, just beyond the window is a church. It has its own graveyard, and there's a line of trees. Late in the night, she catches something. These two pinpoints of light. They're moving in and out of the trees, peeking around, sneaking about back there. She gets out of bed and she's looking. And the longer she looks, the more that she stares at these twin points of light, she starts to feel a little bit more nervous. She thought them to be fireflies at first. No, these are eyes, glowing eyes. And as her eyes adjust to the dark, she starts to realize there's a body behind these eyes. And to Amelia's terror, the eyes start to come near the farmhouse. She's terrified. She's absolutely terrified at this point. She goes to the door. She just gets enough time to unlock it. She hears a scratching coming from behind her bedroom window. I don't know if I could be this brave, but Amelia, she looks back. Outside of the window is an ugly, hideous, twisted face. And it's got glowing eyes. What the scratching is this creature's bony fingers trying to open the window. Scratching. It's not able to open the window, though. But it decides, whatever this creature is, it decides that I'm not going to try to scratch the window open now. Now I'm going to pick at the seals around the window. And it succeeds. The window falls out and it snakes an arm in through the window and unlatches the window from the inside. Amelia's terrified. She's paralyzed with fear. This thing moves quickly. And before she knows it, it has its teeth on her neck. Finally, the paralysis breaks and she's able to scream. Both of her brothers race in. They break down the door. The invader sees them, jumps out the window, and goes back the way it came. One of the brothers decides to chase after it, but he's no match for it. This thing is taking giant strides, and it disappears beyond the wall of the churchyard. Amelia is bleeding heavily from the neck, but they're able to get the bleeding stopped, and she decides this isn't anything supernatural. This is probably an escaped convict. And she recovers from her wounds. They decide, the three of them, that they're going to take a little vacation for her to recover on. They go to Switzerland. But while they're in Switzerland, Amelia becomes very homesick for Croglin. Finally, the decision is made, and it's really Amelia that makes the decision. She decides to return to Croglin Grange. What's the chances of this ever happening again? They return back to Croglin Grange. They spend another winter there. But that March, Amelia hears the scratching at her window again. This time, though, she's ready for it. She screams. Boom! Both the brothers knock down the door. This time, they're armed. The creature flees. It's heading back the way it came once again, but her one brother draws a pistol, fires. And he is absolutely certain he has hit this creature in the leg. He sees the bullet hit. He hears it hit. But this thing still escapes. They're not giving up, though. This time, the brothers are able to track it. They see this thing go into a crypt in the graveyard. The brothers are not stupid, though. The brothers are not stupid at all. They're not going into a crypt that probably has a vampire in it. Instead, they're going to gather a group of people and investigate this at daybreak. They open the tomb in the morning, and it is chaos inside the tomb. Coffins thrown about, body parts laying around, broken wood. Only one of the coffins is intact. The lid to this coffin is very loose. It's just sort of laying on top of it. Inside, the group finds the corpse. They look down at the leg. A fresh bullet wound. What's one surefire way of getting rid of a vampire? You set it on fire. They burned the body to ash. And Amelia lived out the rest of her days in peace. This week, I had a listener ask me if I had ever had a UFO encounter. And I said I'd talk about it on this episode. I used to live in this little town called Salisbury, Pennsylvania. There's something odd about that town. I don't know, maybe everybody feels this way about their hometown. And for a while, I thought it was me. I didn't think it was the town. I thought it was me. But once I moved away, I started to realize, no, it wasn't me. I really don't have a lot of paranormal events happen to me anymore. Whereas in Salisbury, the odd, the strange, the unusual, it seemed to happen on a near monthly basis. It's a very Twin Peaksy sort of town. Just on the outskirts of the town, we had a cult. UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings. Tons and tons and tons of ghosts. Even the occasional murder. But for this, we're going to go back to 1994. Round about 10 p.m. at night. And this would have been the summer. I was standing at my friend's place, very, very near to the high school and the cemetery in Salisbury, Pennsylvania. We were on his front porch, right at the corner of it. And behind his house was a line of pine trees, just a single line of pine trees. And then on the other side of his garden, a road, on the other side of that road, a pavilion. So we're talking about the things that 20-year-olds talk about at the time. It's me. It's my friend Barry, his home. And it's another friend of ours, Brandon. They're talking about this, that, the other thing. And I look away, because quite honestly, I'm bored. I look through the pine trees, and I think to myself, when did they put up a new street light? Because I could see through the pine trees a light, and it was that sodium street light, that yellow. Almost a sickly gold. Whenever I was very young, street lights were white. But then the more efficient sodium ones came about, and they were yellow. And I kept looking at this. And right about that time was whenever I heard the sound. It sounded like giant diesel engines. And soon, that yellow light crested over the pine trees. I grabbed Barry and Brandon's attention and had them look. Now, like I said, I was always a student of the paranormal. So I decided to take a quick look at my watch. I memorized the time. Could I tell you what that time is now? No. This was 1994. It's been many, many years. I'll do my best to describe what we saw that night. Traveling south to north was a massive triangle. If you held your fist at arm's length, your fist would not be nearly enough to cover the size of this triangle. It was dark-colored. It was a triangle. It wasn't a boomerang shape. It was a triangle because it was blocking out stars. At the front point of this triangle, two massive yellow lights. And then three smaller lights down the two opposing sides. The back end of the craft, no lights at all. This thing did not move like an aircraft. It moved like a blimp. I've seen blimps before. This thing moved like a blimp. It sounded like a blimp, but it was a huge triangle. Remember I said it was traveling south to north. In Salisbury, Pennsylvania, all the air traffic goes east to west or west to east. The planes are flying from Pittsburgh to either New York City or Washington, D.C. This is the only craft I have ever seen in Salisbury travel south to north. It flew right over us. It flew right over us. Barry's girlfriend lived in the town north of us. He got on the phone to his girlfriend, Angela. She looked up. She saw the same craft we did. After the whole incident was over, after our sighting was done, I checked the time. There was no evidence of any missing time, anything like that. I told a few other people the next day. They said what I probably saw was a stealth aircraft at an air show that was going on in a couple of weeks. They were probably moving it early. And for a long time, I was satisfied with that explanation. Until about 2 years later, whenever I actually got to see the stealth fighter fly over. What we saw was not the stealth. We saw something completely different. Now, am I saying that this was alien? Far from it. Far from it. I believe that what we saw was human-piloted, human-made. It didn't behave any differently than a blimp. If it would have been shaped like a blimp and behaved the exact same way, I would have said this was a blimp. But this thing was a massive black triangle. And that's my sighting. That is my one and only UFO sighting. Our last tale is going to take us into the mountains of Canada, June 1920. Albert Coe, a teenager, is drifting down the river in a canoe. One late evening, Albert hears this yell for help. He follows the cries for help to this gap, and he looks down, and there's a young man who's fallen into the gap. He's hurt pretty bad. This man isn't able to come out by himself. But Albert Coe, he's able to get him out. Now this guy that Albert brings out, he's dressed very strangely. A silver gray jumpsuit. It feels like silk. And there's this little instrument panel just under the chest. And this guy goes, "Did you get trapped in here canoeing?" The guy goes, "No, I was not canoeing. I have a plane nearby. I was fishing." Albert goes, I want to see this plane. He goes, "I really don't want you to see my plane." But Albert's kind of insistent. And this guy, this stranger, goes, "Okay, I can hardly walk by myself. I'll let you see my plane. But only if you don't tell anyone about this." Now, Albert's expecting to see a biplane, some sort of, some sort of glider maybe. No, what Albert sees is a round silver disc on 3 legs. It's about 4.5 feet off the ground. There's no windows. And Albert's looking at this thing going like, well, how are you able to drive this thing with no windows? Albert's really upset about what he's seen. Now, Albert had been traveling with somebody, and pretty soon, his buddy comes back. Albert, true to his word, says nothing about what happened. The next day, they finish their trip down the river. Fast forward about 3 months. Albert gets an invitation to come to the lobby of the Hotel McAlpine. 12:30. Next Saturday. He goes. Sitting in the lobby of the Hotel McAlpine is the stranger he saved. He's kind of afraid to talk to him. Now, Albert has a ton of questions, but he decided, well, this guy is kind of like avoiding talking about his aircraft, so I'm just not going to push it. He gets like a Christmas greeting, and that's about it. He doesn't hear any more from the stranger until April. He gets a message. Come meet me at Lake Mahopac. This is whenever stuff finally goes down. The stranger tells him, and I quote, "You probably already have inkling that I am a stranger to your modern world. This decision of explanation is a personal responsibility. Our mission here will be forever cloaked in the tightest secrecy. If the events that we foresee do not come to pass, our presence here will not be known. The great depth of gratitude that I feel toward you, coupled with the things that you have seen and know exist, has influenced a violation of an uninhibited law of disclosure." Now, he goes on to tell Albert that he was one in a group of men who had come to this planet to observe our advance in science. He said he was a student majoring in electronics. The stranger had taken advantage of the vacation time to rejoin some of his own people who operated one of the established bases off the planet. And he decided that he was going to take this little craft. That way he could come down here and enjoy some fishing. Whenever he left the base, he had told his comrades not to worry if they didn't hear from him for a week. As long as a signal came from the ship, don't worry about me. Then he goes on to tell Albert a little bit more. He tells him, hey, I'm like 304 years older than you. Albert had trouble wrapping his mind around this, that someone could be of such an amazing age, but could act as boyish as he did. The stranger, he had a lot of enthusiasm for little things. He could get lost looking at grasshoppers and playing with butterflies. The stranger then tells Albert, the panel on my chest, that had been smashed in the fall. I couldn't send an emergency call back. So if Albert wouldn't have found him, he would have died. Albert had other meetings with his new friend. They met at Palisades Boat Club, where Albert had his canoe. Albert was quoted as saying that the meetings were so rare and far between that he would have canceled a date with his girlfriend just to go there. Albert Coe's friend, who divulged his name to him as Zret, would meet with him over the span of 5 decades. Throughout these meetings, they would go into great detail about Zret's home world, his people. Zret's civilization came from a planet named Norka, which orbited Tau Ceti. And that's a star around 11 light years from us. Around 14,000 years ago, my cat. Around 14,000 years ago, Norka began to experience a dehydration, making life impossible there. The Norkans found our sun. They went, oh, hey, this solar system, this is very similar to ours. And they send small teams to explore the planets. Brief contact was made with the Cro-Magnon humans. Bases are established on Venus and Mars. 62 huge carrier ships evacuated a total of 243,000 Norkans on a disastrous journey. All but one of the vehicles would be drawn into the sun. The sole surviving craft crash lands on Mars, killing 1,500 of the 5,000 plus on board. On and on and on the stories went, the tales went. And Ko did not breathe a word of this, true to his word, until the late 1950s. Zret is given permission to inform his wife of this friendship, the stories behind it. She found it hard to believe. The 1960s move on. Ko is still meeting with Zret. And he self-publishes a book called The Shocking Truth. I'm going to leave a link to a PDF for The Shocking Truth so that you can read it yourself in your own time. It's an interesting story. Is it true? I don't know. Part of me wants to believe it's true. The other part of me knows that it's not. But it would be nice for the other part to be wrong. Thank you for joining us this week on Strange Pathways. Head on over to our Facebook page. You're going to find images based on the tales that we told you today, plus a link to a PDF of Albert Ko's The Shocking Truth. Be sure to comment. Be sure to like us. Subscribe on YouTube. Give us the thumbs up rating while you still can. And you know what? Word of mouth is going to make this show grow. Tell a friend. Be sure to mention us on the forums that you go to. I do see every once in a while, especially on the X boards on 4chan, people mentioning Strange Pathways, and it just makes my heart feel so good. Thank you once again for joining us this week. Take care of yourselves and each other.